Armchair commanders, we call the shots. From our living room thrones where the action's hot. We're the generals of fiction, the masters of war. In silver screen battles with buttered popcorn. Armchair commanders, armchair commanders.
All right. Welcome to the Armchair Commanders podcast. My name is John, and this week we have a very special episode. We're going to be reviewing The Patriot, and we have the guys from Little Wars TV rejoining us to discuss it. Tony, Greg, if you'd like to say hi and tell folks a little bit about yourselves.
It is good to be back.
That was stellar.
Yeah,
it is good to be back. Love watching historical movies, talking about historical movies, and this one is different. So this will be fun.
Well, you got to pick the last one, Tony, a movie that I had never seen before, and it was pretty cool, in advance of the podcast to go back and watch an old time, classic World War II film. But I'm pretty sure that tonight's movie is one that everyone has seen.
That's probably a safe bet.
I think that is all. I would have to agree with that. That if you didn't see it when it first came out, like, this is definitely one of those movies that's also very popular for TV, and not to mention, like, with it being 4th of July weekend when this episode comes out, if you're a person who still has just regular cable, like, there's a strong chance at least like 2 different stations are playing The Patriot for 4th of July.
That's right.
Which I think it's an interesting thing to consider. Like, we obviously, America, we love the 4th of July, like, hooray, hamburgers, hot dogs, and explosives. Like, what better way to spend a day? And we have such a mythologized view of the founding fathers and of the American Revolution. But it seems to me like American Revolution pop culture media is seriously lacking. Like, we have this film, we have, the Washington crossing the Delaware film. There was that one AMC series, Turn, and, bits and pieces here and there. But Hollywood is not pumping out an American Revolution film every other year the way they are pumping out World War II or World War I films, And I just find it interesting that for something that's so big, for as much of a pedestal as we put the American Revolution on, it shocks me how narrow the pop culture section is for it.
Well, I am really excited to hear your theories and Tony's theories as to why you think that is, because one of the reasons I suggested that we talk about The Patriot for this podcast is that I just finished putting together a pretty lengthy video for Little Wars TV where I analyze The Patriot. And the focus of my analysis is actually the question that you just asked. Why isn't there more content about the American Revolution? Why do we only have The Patriot? It's the only big budget Hollywood film that's been done in 50 years. So what could possibly explain that? I mean, it's a really interesting question.
I can only imagine that one thing, like, or if you want to continue I didn't know if that was a dramatic pause or not. But
no, though, that's a dramatic pause for the two of you to pontificate, because in the video that I recorded for the channel, which will be out on July 4th, I tried to come up with 5, 6, maybe 7 different theories for why I thought it could be the case, and I just kind of talk through them. So, like, I'm interested. I haven't previewed that video for anyone. Tony hasn't seen the video. I'm very curious to kind of know where the two of you guys go when you think about that question, because as you said, John, every other war in American history has movies, multiple movies.
Well, and it's funny, John mentioned the churning out of World War II and World War One movies, but World War One movies weren't getting any. World War One wasn't getting any coverage for the longest time. There was Sergeant York, and after that, it was crickets about World War One, and there's very little. If I'm remembering correctly, the only thing that pops into my head, there's the Patriot, and I I would struggle to come up with another movie. I mean, there were some made for TV or Netflix kind of things about George Washington, but a movie about the American Revolution, I'm stumped to name one other than the Patriot.
The reason that you're stumped to name one is I can tell you, because I looked into this for the video that I did, there are zero. In 50 years, Hollywood has produced one movie about the American Revolution, and it is The Patriot. Now, John mentioned The Crossing, which was a made-for-TV special with I
That
think
that
it
was
Jeff
when
Daniels.
Ted Turner was pumping out a ton of historical material.
Yeah, so I mean that was a made-for-television movie. Actually, I think The Crossing is pretty good. John, you mentioned Turn, a television series that ran on AMC for several seasons. It was decent, I think, but again, that's TV. John Adams, did you guys see the HBO miniseries a few years ago?
That's
that was
actually
excellent.
It's a yearly tradition of mine that I will watch episode 2 the week of 4th of July.
Oh, cool. That's cool. It's a great
that's
series.
a big Declaration of Independence episode.
Sure. Yeah, that's a spectacular series. Again, we're talking television. All of these are television. Now, the HBO miniseries was pretty big budget, but again, if you want to go back to Hollywood, nothing. The last one was made in the early 70s.
I don't know that we can count the Adams series in that it goes long after the Revolution. The Revolution is just a chapter for all intents and purposes.
True. But again, if we're, beggars can't be choosers, apparently. Right. And so like we're scraping up everything that we possibly can. And there are no other movies. And it's like, well, what explains that? Is that a coincidence? Is it more than a coincidence? Is it a willful choice that all of these different studios are making?
Well, and here's the thing is that, because I've thought about this quite a bit, because, I wish there was more American Revolution films, because there's lots of great stories from this time period to be had. Like, you just like any other conflict or any other time period, like this is a tremendous time period to be looking at, just the political nature of like Continental Congress and all of that. Or you can even look at, the big line battles if you want, or like the Patriot does, it focuses a lot on, the smaller militia size battles. So, I mean, there's plenty of material to be had. And I think the other thing that often gets misconstrued is that I think just like the average American, not trying to downplay our education system here, but I think a lot of Americans, for us, it's, we signed the Declaration of Independence, Washington crossed the Delaware, hip hip hooray, we win. People don't realize that this was a nearly decades-long war. And I don't know if that goes back to the whole we just bullet point mythologize it issue, or if it's literally that's the only thing people have the attention span for. But I would even argue people do have the attention span, because we got a 3-hour musical about the first Secretary of the Treasury, and it was the most popular thing in the fucking world. Like literally a worldwide phenomenon.
Right.
Like,
right. And I think one of the things that contributes to the lack of Revolutionary War films, and one of the things that contributed to the popularity of Hamilton, these people have been given mythological status, and the American Revolution and our mythical perception of the founding fathers, I think, has prevented us from portraying them in film. It was almost untouchable, because what if somehow we managed to show any of them in a bad light? And I think slowly, gradually, now we are at a point in our society where we can actually have, and maybe I'm just blowing smoke, but I'm thinking we are finally reaching a point where we can have an honest conversation about the fact that at the end of the day, these were just men, and they put their breeches on one leg at a time, just like we do. But I think for a long time, the whole mythology of these people and their deeds was so huge that it was a sacred cow.
I think
That's a fair point. Yeah, that could totally be the case.
Like, and kind of going further along with that, obviously we're always constantly moving forward, from, the sins of the father, so to speak, with like the big elephant obviously being, the whole conversation about we're starting a country based on liberty and also maintaining a system of slavery while we do that. But what Hamilton taught us is that, and like you said, they're normal people or regular people, like, that aren't perfect. But what Hamilton taught us is that the American people not only are more than capable of handling the less than great side of history, but they actually want it and they love it. Like, Alexander Hamilton made a lot of mistakes in his life, but it's that human element that people really latched onto as far as his story being told. Like, I think maybe there's a hesitation because there's this, and I think this is a great place to start off with the actual movie, The Patriot, is like in the very first scene, or the earliest scene, that is, we're at Moore's plantation, and we see people of color working there, and like a normal person brain should be able to interpret, okay, this is 1776 South Carolina, those are slaves. And maybe like 20 minutes later, when we get the evil Colonel Tavington show up, because we got to have the superimposing, like, most Disney cartoon villain ever be our antagonist. He's like, he looks at the people of color that are on this plantation. He's like, per order of the crown, all enslaved people in the colonies in rebellion shall be granted their freedom if they fight for the king. And they're like, oh, but sir, we're freedmen. We work this plantation willingly. And it's like, shut the fuck up. Like, no.
John, they're happy employees. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Right.
They're happy employees.
They're happy employees.
And it's like, I get what they're doing with that in this film, which is like, and in fact, actually, I don't know what they're doing with this film, because we have Mel Gibson is this character.
It's called whitewashing.
Yes. Thank you. I lost for words sometimes. It's like, oh, he's this moral, upright, very knowledgeable person, very philosophical, all this. Like, he doesn't have slaves. He has free people that he gainfully employs on his plantation. Okay, whatever. But his like one fault is like, they keep mentioning that he was a part of this like massacre during the French and Indian War. And it's like, okay, well, we already established he has a fault. Why can we not just be honest and truthful to the fact that 1700 South Carolina, these people are slaves?
Yeah, I it is a little dishonest, the way they portray the relationship of the slaves to the plantation owners. Like, oh, we're all just a big happy family. We know that that's not actually how the contract works. And I don't think that we do anybody any service by making it seem like, as Greg said, they're just happy employees. That's not what it is here.
I do think you are dead on to point out that specific scene, because maybe that scene you just mentioned is one of the reasons why we haven't seen more movies about the American Revolution. And this is a point that I do touch on in my analysis coming up on the 4th. Like, there are some really difficult themes that are around the American Revolution. There is a mythology that we have all told ourselves that we think we know about the story of America's founding. And maybe it's a place where Hollywood studios and screenwriters just don't want to tread. Maybe they don't want to upset that mythology, because there are some really uncomfortable truths in the mythology. And the whole slavery thing is just one of them. There are actually quite a few uncomfortable truths. And so I don't know. I do think that there's something to this. There's no one answer, by the way. I think there's probably a combination of reasons, but this feels like it could be one of them, because there are a number of historical like themes that you can tell the Patriot has to kind of dance around pretty delicately. And the slavery thing is one of them. Fun side note on that slavery thing you mentioned. Mel Gibson actually told the director during filming that they should rewrite the script to make him a slave owner, because he felt that it would have been more historically accurate for him to be a slave owner. And they didn't take him up on that.
And it made him feel all warm and fuzzy.
Of course it did.
I don't know. One thing, and don't get me wrong, I think Mel Gibson, like, for his faults as a human being, Mel Gibson is a good actor.
Oh, like, yeah.
Like, I know it's hard to appreciate somebody's skills when they've done some very questionable things in their life. But what I got from this film was like, yeah, he like there were some solid scenes of acting, like him giving his speech at the state level in Charleston, in their like house or their local representative group. I forgot what they called it, like their version of House of Burgesses or something. Like that's a great scene where, you know, he gives his little soliloquy about like, I will not send someone else to fight for me, this, that, and the other. And that's great. But then we fast forward to the first scene, like immediately after, like his first kid is murdered by Tavington, and he goes on this murder rampage, and you're like, oh, you're just reliving Braveheart now. Like,
absolutely.
It's like Hollywood came to you and said, hey, how would you like to do Braveheart, but America?
Well, but before we get any farther into the Patriot, let me just ask both of you a very high level question. Do you like the Patriot as a movie? Because I have never spoken to anyone who doesn't have very strong feelings about the Patriot, one way or the other. You know, like, so I'm just curious to know, when you heard this was the selection that we were going to be talking tonight, what do you think of the Patriot as a film?
Now that's pretty vague. I gotta be honest, Greg.
Were you excited to rewatch the Patriot? Let me rephrase it.
How do I view it as a film? I have mixed emotions about the Patriot as a film. First off, in no particular order. First off, I disagree with John about Mel Gibson and his acting ability.
Okay.
Mel Gibson, to me, is like Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp plays the same character in every movie he's ever been in. Mel Gibson plays the same character in every movie he's ever been in, whether it's Mad Max, what was the the buddy films with him as the cop. I can't remember
Rush
the
Hour.
name. What's that?
Rush Hour.
Yeah.
No?
No, where he plays
Was it Beverly
Riggs,
Hills?
the mentally unhinged suicidal cop. Was that Rush Hour? I don't know. But Braveheart, The Patriot, Mel Gibson plays the same character in every movie. He suffered some grievous loss of his family, and he has a dark past, and he goes on a murderous rampage. He plays that guy in every film. Not that, don't get me wrong, that is box office money right there. Totally, every day, all day. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger, like Johnny Depp, they have a niche and they fill it. And kudos to Mel Gibson. And his personal politics doesn't enter into his acting ability. I just think that he always plays the same type in every film. So that affects my opinion of the movie depending on my mood. The movie fails to address some of the darker issues of the Revolutionary War, as we discussed earlier, slavery being one of them. For just entertainment value, for 2.5 hours of it, don't get me wrong, the movie is beautiful in terms of the scenery and all of it. It's beautifully filmed. The sets are beautiful. It is a period about which there is nothing else on film. But for whatever reason, I don't hate the film. I don't love the film. I'm kind of meh about the whole thing. And I can't pin down why.
John?
So when I was messaging Tony about it, one, I was excited because, it worked out perfectly that we'll be getting this out for 4th of July, because who doesn't love doing topical things for specific days and whatnot? But the first thing I said to him, I was like, oh, The Patriot, it's a guilty pleasure of mine. And here's the thing, is like, as a kid, mind you, like the first time I watched this, I was, single digits in age. Sorry, didn't mean to make you feel any particular way because of that, but look, I'm old enough to remember 9/11. Okay, like, does that satiate your old man feelings?
Tony is just grimacing.
Wow. My old man feelings. Now I'm right in the feels, brother. Right in the feels.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
It's okay. I get so much shit at work because there will be days where, like, there are people there that are like, I started working here before you were born. And I'm like, okay. Like, but anyways, so as a kid, like, so my dad, he was active duty military. As a kid, I grew up on a military base. As a grade school kid, I was watching, like, back when, you could still rent VHS and DVDs. Like, this was always number one on my I want to rent this list, and just watch the hell out of it, because it is an uber, like, America fuck yeah kind of film. It is. Which is all the more interesting that we get this super, like, America kind of film, but it was produced and released before 9/11. Like, this was the perfect 9/11 response film, and 9/11 hadn't even happened yet.
That's a great point.
That's interesting. That's an interesting way to look at it.
Because, like, post 9/11, I think we get films like Black Hawk Down, stuff like that, which are also, like, not necessarily like America fuck yeah, but very, like, rah rah go U.S. military type films. So we have this super patriotic, feel-good America story film that I grew up with, and it aligns with the environment I was growing up in, which is I was growing up on a military base, which is another really big rah rah go America type of environment. As I age and I continue to watch it, I still watch it. I still enjoy it. I, however, find myself getting more and more frustrated every time I go back to it. Like when I got to college and started doing my history degree was when the steep decline in my appreciation of this film was happening. So it became less and less like, yeah, we're showing the British what for. It was more like, all right, this is the only American Revolution film I have, so guess I'm going to have to enjoy it. I don't know if that answers your question, but
let me ask one follow-up on what you just said there. You said that The Patriot is a guilty pleasure for you. What's the
yes.
guilty part?
There's so many historical half-truths to it. It's like, so we have Mel Gibson, our main character, who, you know, he's called the Ghost. And, you know, there's a real American revolutionary leader who was named the Swamp Fox. You know, Tabington is loosely based on, God, now I'm blanking on his name, but there's an actual
Bannister Tarleton.
Yeah, Tarleton. So it's like you have all these real people. Why are we changing their names? But two, this is one of those films where it's like we have the big event of like the Battle of Camden, or we have the big event of like the surrender of Yorktown, but everything else is kind of just loose. Like everything is happening in American Revolution setting, but not really related to anything in particular. So it's like, it's almost like this, I don't know it. And I don't know if this is the right correlation to it, but it feels like somebody's doing a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, but it's American Revolution. Like that's how the storytelling of this film feels to me. Like there's enough ancillary true background facts going on that it's like, oh yeah, this is the revolution, but everything that's directly in front of you is made up.
Yeah, like some D&D campaign where they're ripping off Lord of the Rings. It feels like it, but it isn't.
Right. So that's the guilty part for me. It's like we already know you are ripping from plenty of true historical examples to craft your film. Why not just tell the actual story?
And why do you suppose they do that, though? Because you're right, there are some analogies there. There are some, they're riffing on historical characters, but why didn't they just make it? Is it because they wanted, did they not find the actual stories film worthy? Did they want to be able to play fast and loose with characters? I'm not sure why they do that sort of pseudo historical.
I feel like
I mean, this is clearly
we need carte blanche to do any war crime we want in this film.
There's a lot of those. There's a lot of those.
Like, I'm not saying there wasn't war crimes happening during this time period, but I don't know, locking an entire town up in a church is not something I remember reading.
There's a lot of, I don't know, gratuitous violence in this film. I was watching it this evening. I haven't watched it in a while. So prior to us getting here together tonight, I was watching it, and my girlfriend and I are sitting in the living room, and the scene where Mel Gibson goes all apeshit on the guy in the creek with the hatchet while his sons watch.
I love that scene.
He does the Mel Gibson.
And the kids are looking at him. And my girlfriend is like, that little boy isn't going to sleep until he's like 25. He won't be able to close his eyes.
This is
There's
why they did not open the mail until he said so. They knew what was going to happen.
Oh yeah, Daddy, I promise I'll get A's on my homework. Please don't axe murder me. They don't explain how his wife died, but from that scene we can glean a hint or two.
So I completely lost my train of thought there. So kind of moving on, I mentioned the fact that there's a lot of historical half-truths to this, but like, I think the part of this film I really do like is the portrayal of 18th century just battle. Like, there's almost nothing when it comes to American Revolution content, and there's very limited Napoleonic style warfare films as well. Like, if we open it up to Napoleon and all the other conflicts, we get more of that stuff. But like, even though we only have one specific battle in this movie that we can reference, which is Battle of Camden, like all the other big line battles we see in this movie, like, I'm just a sucker for those moments. Like, I think they're shot so well, like they're paced very well also. Also a little bit gratuitous with the violence, which, I mean, if we're going to be gratuitous somewhere, it might as well be the battlefield. But what did you guys think of like the big line battles?
I loved it. I think the line battles are one of the rare historical strengths of the film. And critics at the time, I went back and I read some reviews back from 2000 when the movie came out. Obviously, there were a lot of criticisms about historical inaccuracy in the movie, even back then. But one of the areas of praise that the film got, one was the costumes and the sets, which you mentioned, and the costumes and the sets are fantastic. It really does look appropriate. And the other was the battles. I think they do a very admirable job for a big budget Hollywood movie of showing what these battles might have looked like. And we have to say might because we really don't know, and there's a lot of competing theories about what they looked like. But one of the details, you'll remember the scene very well. It's not at the Battle of Camden. It's in one of the intermediary battles. Mel Gibson and his son, Heath Ledger, are watching this skirmish unfold from inside of a house. It's in the first quarter of the movie. And the Americans and the British are meeting each other in a field in front of the house, and a cannon is fired. And you see the cannonball skip in front of the line and tear a guy's leg off. I mean, it's like an extremely memorable moment in the battle. And really well done, because actually that is how artillery was used at this time. They did not have those explosive shells that you think of from later periods of history. It was bounce through fire. They actually did roll the cannonballs and try to just blow away a line of guys with a cannonball rolling and bouncing on the ground. Not something that you see depicted very often. Hollywood wants to have big explosions going off and have it look really cool. I thought that was a really nice touch, a really good depiction. So,
and at one point, a cannonball.
If we're talking about historical accuracy, I like the battles. It takes the guy's head clean off.
I always forget about that scene, and it's always super drag. You're like, ah.
Yeah, and you're right, Greg. That is one of the moments of historical accuracy. There's the cuirassier armor from Waterloo, and I don't know what museum. I can't remember what museum it's in. Where
it's at the Tower of London.
Yes, okay. The cannonball goes through some poor, unfortunate French cavalryman's cuirassier and out the back. And you look at it, you go, wow, that went right through. Yes, it went right through a freaking person who was wearing that armor. cannonballs were just a solid chunk of metal, and the idea was that you fired them and they bounced their way through lines, just maiming and massacring people. And I thought that was one of the few accurate portrayals of cannon fire from that period, because like you said, in Hollywood we're always used to the big explosions. There's a scene where there's a wagon and they shoot the back of the wagon and it's apparently full of ammunition, but it blows up in a fantastic fireball. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, that's were they transporting napalm to Yorktown perhaps? I don't know, but it just struck me as that was unnecessary.
I also really liked the like militia ambush scenes, or at least that was a good little montage they had. It was, because I think that montage really helps sell the passage of time as they're fighting this conflict. Because it goes through the different seasons. But it hits me right in that, like, I don't know if this was ever like, there's like a meme of like high school kids who like learn about like the Civil War or the American Revolution. And it's like, why do they just stand in a line? Why don't they just like hide in the trees? And it's like, this movie is doing it's like the movie was written by a high schooler. It's like, yeah, we're not like those dumb redcoats.
I do think there is a certain, like you alluded to earlier, the rah rah America. There's a certain, I don't know what the right term is, but there's a certain style there that portrays the Americans as so much more savvy than the British. Look at us, we're gonna hide behind the trees and shoot your officers. We're way smarter.
A really good like additional example of that is like, it's interesting how we portray the British, because one, we have Tavington, who is essentially a James Bond villain in a fucking red coat. He's just out here committing every war crime known to man. We get multiple pieces of exposition from Mel Gibson. Like one of the most like telling ones is like, oh, he's a fool for engaging them in, an open field, like line to line battle. It's like, that's the fucking style of fighting of the time. But I digress. Anyways, we get all these different hints of like, they're numerically superior to us. They have more training. Like, we get that scene when they're voting on whether or not to pass the levy to fund the state to fund the revolution. And God, what was his name? Chris Cooper's character. He's like, I was at Bunker Hill and they charged us 3 times and we killed 700 of them and it didn't matter to them. So we get this image of them being this super imposing, tough enemy that's like, it feeds into our American mythos of like, we were not supposed to win this war, which realistically we shouldn't have, given what we had going on. But then we get a scene where Mel Gibson is talking to Cornwallis and he does this like, I want to do a prisoner exchange. And it turns out they're scarecrows. And it's like, haha, we fooled the British, idiots. Like, and it's so weird how we can paint them to be these like big dum-dums while also being this like unbeatable force that we overcome. Like, it's a weird dichotomy to have.
I do think that dichotomy is present in most of the sort of rah-rah patriotic war movies that Hollywood has produced, that the enemy is somehow both brilliant on the battlefield and yet somehow gullible and susceptible to the simplest of tricks. And I think that goes to the American psyche, where we want to show that simple down home folk wisdom of us country folk in our F-150s or our covered wagons or whatever are way smarter than all these sophisticated Europeans, but that they present this enormous threat to us, which we defeat. I think that's just part of what we as Americans, that's just how we think of them. I do think that almost all those sort of patriotic war movies portray the enemy as a combination of tactically smart and yet susceptible to good old Yankee ingenuity, as it were. I think that's just a trope that shows up in a lot of patriotism inspired war films in this country.
I think the best way to, maybe a good analogy to it, is the Hogan's Heroes example of portraying our enemy. Like,
What he
Germany's
said.
got like some of the most impressive fighting forces ever, but then we have Colonel Clint going, Hogan!
Oh my God, as somebody who watched Hogan's Heroes, I cannot tell you how many Hogan's Heroes reruns I have watched. I've probably seen every Hogan's Heroes episode at least once.
I have the box set downstairs.
Oh, damn it. Now I'm gonna have to Amazon that shit. Thank you very much.
My Hogan's Heroes box set is right next to the emergency box set.
You didn't have to admit that.
Look, oddly enough, my first job I ever had was I was a firefighter. So there was a lot of emergency that was on TV.
Yeah.
Which I also have the complete, I don't know that this is really worth bragging about, but emergency really on top of the merchandising game. I'm guessing you've seen the movie Spaceballs.
I actually have not. I know of the movie, but I've never seen it.
So Greg knows what I'm talking about when it's like Spaceballs the lunchbox, Spaceballs the blanket, Spaceballs the flamethrower. Emergency was very much the same way, and I have the entire emergency comic book set that's been graded and placard and all that stuff.
I will confess, John, one year I went to school with an emergency lunchbox. Back in the day when they were...
I'll buy that from you.
What's that?
So if you still have it, I'll buy it from you.
Oh, that's long gone. But back in the days when they were stamped steel and came with a matching thermos.
Back when we used to be a proper country and we had stamped steel lunchboxes.
Get off my lawn, you young whippersnappers.
I had to laugh because so today, the day that we're recording this, Denver had their Pride Festival. And so me and my wife went to it. Just, it's a nice summer day, get out, do something. And, Pride Festival, lots of interesting sights to be had at those. And I just remember seeing like this group of like 20 some furries walk by. And I kind of did like a and my wife, her name's Miranda, she looked at me, she's like, what? And I'm like, this is what George Washington was fighting for. I can't wait to discuss this tonight.
I don't know that George Washington specifically mentioned the furries. I'm not saying that he didn't fight for them. I believe, and there's another myth about our country and the revolution, that this was all about Joe Everyman getting a say. And and
I'm
back
reading
to the movie. The movie really feels, it's almost like a father-son getting to know each other film with the American Revolution in the background. Like that's the backdrop for Mel Gibson and Keith Ledger as father and son to discover each other as men, as people other than just dad and son.
Tell me what happened.
And the
at Fort
American
Worth,
Revolution
Father.
is just a backdrop. A good bit of the film really feels that way to me. Like that could have been in any setting. We could have set that in. Heath Ledger could have been going to Vietnam, and his dad was a college professor who was against the war, or pick a setting and just put some politics and historical events in the background. A lot of the movie, and I think that's why I'm only Mets about the whole thing, is a lot of the movie doesn't really focus on, like, a lot of the movie isn't really about the revolution. It's just in the background.
The revolution's the setting, it's not the topic.
No, you're absolutely right there. To Greg's point, now there are no movies about the American Revolution.
Look at me.
But why
I am
does
the
that- I
Revolutionary War film now.
Why does that bother you, Tony? I mean,
Well, I'm
it
not
doesn't
saying
need
it
to be. It's not a
bothers me.
documentary.
No. I'm not saying it bothers me, but we talked about the lack of Revolutionary War films. And the more we are discussing this and talking about it, the more I realize that this isn't really a Revolutionary War film. This is a film set in the American Revolution. I don't know if either of you have ever seen The Duelist.
It's on my watch.
Ridley Scott's first movie.
Yes. I should have known you would recognize it. It is set during the Napoleonic Wars, but it has pretty much jack shit to do with the Napoleonic Wars. And I think not to that same extent, but to a large extent, the film isn't really about the American Revolution.
Yeah,
I
I'm not totally with you. I'm not totally with you on that. I understand why you would say that. It's definitely built around like a family drama for sure. But there's a lot of connective tissue, I think, to the revolution. I mean, one of the things that I found really curious about the film is that they try to have it both ways. Like, they try to have real historical characters that are named, like Cornwallis. Cornwallis is a character in the film. He's a real historical personality. But then many of the other characters are based on historical people, but are not historical personalities. And if you listen to the filmmakers and the writer of the film and the producer of the film afterward, they're very careful to say, well, it's not historical. It's Benjamin Martin is a made-up character. This is a fictionalized tale.
It's inspired by, not based on film.
It's inspired by. And it's like, look, I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with it being inspired by. That is fine. But you can't have it both ways. You can't have some characters in the movie that are named historical personalities and then have other characters in the movie who are not. And then try to claim, oh, yes, historical accuracy was important to us. They had someone from the Smithsonian on set. Like, they really wanted to tell you that they took the history seriously. But in the very next sentence, they said, well, no. It's fictionalized. It's fictionalized. Well, which is it?
Yeah,
it lets them off the hook when they do something stupid. Like, whoa, we're not slaves, sir. We are free men who work here willingly. Okay.
Yes, and I'm willing to let them off the hook for that if they were to pick a lane, because there's plenty of movies. It's not just The Patriot. I mean, look at Braveheart, look at Gladiator. Those are both movies that I really enjoy that are based on historical settings, but are clearly fictionalized. In both cases, they are very fictionalized retellings of historical events. But The Patriot tries to walk this weird middle ground where they try to really portray it in a historical light while also claiming that it's fictionalized to get themselves off the hook. And it's like, I wish they had just picked a lane. If it's going to be a fictional retelling, that's cool. That's totally fine. You got to commit to that.
Yeah, and I think as a result of the scene with Mel Gibson in Cornwallis headquarters and the prisoner exchange, the historical character meeting the fictional character is somewhat hard to swallow in certain ways, because it's not like the American Revolution happened so long ago that there's no historical record of it. This isn't right. This isn't something that happened in ancient Sparta and nobody bothered to write it down.
Well, you see, that would require people to know how to read cursive. So that's the major hang.
You're right, because we don't teach cursive in schools. We don't.
Not to mention the whole F and S flipping thing. I mean, that's too hard.
Right.
That is confusing.
Right. Hey, they taught me cursive, and that whole F and S thing still screws with me.
That was actually part of when I was getting my degree. I took a class on the American Revolution, and that was like we had an entire week where we just learned how to read 18th century cursive specifically, because it was like, okay, this is what we're doing week 1 so that we can read primary sources for the rest of the class.
Oh, nice.
So
yeah,
that's my useless party trick I like to pull out, is being able to read 18th century cursive. But
yeah, that brings all the ladies to the yard, I'm sure.
Yeah,
you must go to some real banger parties.
Yeah. But kind of mentioning the whole party aspect of it. So my wife, that's my fun, like, look what I can do, like, brag. So obviously I'm not a very cool guy. I don't have a lot in that realm going for me. But so my wife watched this film with me, and she had never seen it before. And a lot of the times when I watch these movies, she will stay 5-10 minutes, make like some sort of smart ass comment, and then leave, because war films are not really her thing. This one, she stayed the whole film, or 2/3 of the film, up until Heath Ledger died, and that was the only reason she stuck around. She's like, "Oh, Heath Ledger's in this," so that's my. She's like I heard her audibly sigh, like, "Oh, he's so hot." I'm like, "What the? I'm right here."
I'm Heath Ledger aside, I'm not surprised to hear that she would have stuck around for the majority of the film, because honestly, I think if we set aside the historical inaccuracies, which I realize is a big part of what we're talking about here tonight, The Patriot's a really good story. Like, if you just want to look at this as a narrative, as a story and a script, I think it's an excellent story. Like, I think there are interesting characters with high stakes. There's action. There's romance. Like, yeah, I think there are memorable characters.
We could rewrite this story for it to be on a spaceship, and you'd be like, this is an amazing film. I think it's because we have that historical backdrop that we're so hard on it.
Totally. Oh, yeah. I totally agree.
I would absolutely agree. And I think that as a film about a family, especially the father and the son discovering each other against this backdrop of this awful dramatic period, you're right. If we could make that some sort of space thing where the son finds out that dad is the evil villain, It's set against the Galactic Rebellion, and it would be a good film. But I think it was a good story. I think the cinematography and the settings and the costumes were beautiful.
Oh, and the
I'm
music,
not,
John Williams, the score.
yeah, the score is fantastic. I'm just, as far as a film about the American Revolution, it is not. Um, it falls short of being about the American Revolution. It's set against the panorama of the American Revolution, but I that's not a bad thing. It's not at all a bad thing. I think it's a good movie, but I think if we want to look at it as even a fictionalized accounting of the American Revolution, it's only at best. As a film, if you ignore the fact that it's pretending to be about the American Revolution, it's a great movie. And I can watch it in that light and enjoy the film.
Yeah, I think if we want to come full circle with how we started this conversation, I do think that one of the reasons that people, myself included, grade this movie really harshly is because it is the only example we have of a Revolutionary War set film. So it sticks out like a sore thumb because it's the only example there is. And you're like, damn, man, if this is the only one we got, like I wish they would have gotten more of it right. If there were 50 movies set during the American Revolution, if this was like a World War II thing, I think that people would grade the Patriot much more generously than they do with it being the only one.
Which brings me to the question, John and Greg, why, this being such an absolutely pivotal moment in American history, this is why we have the term American history. Why the hell is this the only movie about the American Revolution?
That's the $1 million question to me. I truly wish that I had an answer to that.
I like the idea that it's nobody wants to touch the mythos because out of fear of like, oh well, if we chop down the proverbial cherry tree, like we're going to meet our end. But it's like I mentioned earlier, with Hamilton, the American people have more than proven that one, we want this kind of material, and two, we're more than willing to engage with the tough topics that surround it. Because I think that's there's a lot of talk recently, especially with how, it's an ebb and flow, especially with like the Civil War and how we are dealing with like the Confederates and their legacy. I think it's one of those things where it's people are afraid to unravel the legacy of the founding fathers because of that. But I think we're more than capable of handling it. Like, for example, I have good old George Washington tattooed right here. Okay. He is my favorite president. He is my favorite historical figure. He is like, I'm a Freemason. He's a big person in Freemasonry. He is a person that I deeply respect and I love studying. He was a slave owner. He had many, many problems. But I can recognize the fact that despite not being a perfect person and having done bad things in his life, that doesn't necessarily make him an overall bad person. And I think that is a topic a lot of people are not willing to broach. Like, I started doing the American Revolutionary War Museum in Philadelphia. They started a new hashtag and it's I've decided to latch on to it and do a series, but it's because this is the 249th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration this year. Next year will be the 250th. So everybody's really ramping up on, the Revolutionary War history, as it were, which it's even more confusing why Hollywood wouldn't want to latch onto it given the big anniversary year it is. But they came up with this hashtag. It's called Read the Revolution. So my goal as a part of the series I'm working on is to read as many different types of American Revolutionary War books as possible and do reviews of them. And I just finished a book that was specifically about, the book was called An Imperfect God, and it only examined George Washington through the lens of being a slave owner. It's a super interesting topic, and it was one of those things that even as a person who owns slaves and like the infinite number of like, oh, this social structure, like aside, like even as a dude who owned slaves and participated in the system and perpetrated this heinous act against humanity, like he still struggled with it himself. And I think that's the thing people miss out on, is that, like we said earlier, they're just people. They are, it's like the title of the book says, they are imperfect.
Now, my question, John, it's been 25 years since the Patriot came out.
Yeah.
And Hamilton, as you pointed out, has been a smash hit. Do you think that we are finally ready for Hollywood to look at the American Revolution as material for film?
I think we've been ready. Like all Hamilton showed to me was that we were more than capable of handling this material, and that the people actually do want it. Like, it's not just you, me, and Greg sitting here being like, oh, where's the, Battle of Monmouth movie? Like,
so you're thinking the Battle of Monmouth is going to be the next box office titan?
No, but I think there's something to be said. There definitely could be a Lexington and Concord film. There could be a Bunker Hill film. Like,
oh yeah, I was just screwing with you. It's definitely Bunker Hill. It's not Monmouth, dude.
By the way, loved your guys' Bunker Hill scenario that you did.
Oh, thanks. That was a fun one. Yeah, tough scenario.
But I definitely think there's room for a Bunker Hill specific film. Like, could you imagine like having the whole lead up of the revolution, tar and feather, and Congress doing its thing, and then like the last 30 minutes of the movie is just this one prolonged battle scene of Bunker Hill? Like, that would be amazing.
Oh, absolutely. I would totally go to a theater. I'll be honest. I go to the theater to see a movie on very rare occasions. It has to be something that, I don't know, I can sit in my own living room and stream a movie for a third of the price it cost me in the theater, and I can put my feet up and I can have a beverage and I can make some offensive comment that my girlfriend looks at me and says, "What the is wrong with you?" In my own home. So for me to go to a theater and have to shut up for 2.5 hours and not put my feet on anything but the floor.
Oh, they have recliners now, so.
Yes, there are in some of the theaters. It's a great age we live in. But a film has got to be really special for me to go see in a theater. But I would absolutely go see a film about the beginning of the revolution in New England, Lexington and Concord, and the last 30 minutes of the film is Bunker Hill. I would pay money to see that shit. I would pay for the overpriced popcorn and the overpriced tickets and all of that and have 12 inches of leg room to see that. I really would.
Hey, a lot of movie theaters also have bars now.
Yeah, so you see,
Now he's interested.
hey. I'm just a simple country bumpkin living in small town central PA. All of the big city ways that you speak of have not filtered out to the hinterlands where I reside. Things are different for Greg because his status in life means that he has servants and entree into a wider.
No, he has willing employees, is what he has.
Yes, willing
Thank you, John.
employees.
Thank you, John. I want to end this with a little bit of pushback on both of you on something that I think is thought provoking. We're talking about why there aren't any more Revolutionary War films, right? And we've come up a couple theories. I agree with you, John. I think the mythos and the fear of chopping down the proverbial cherry tree, I do think that's a reason screenwriters and studios might shy away. But here's something to think about.
Feel free to steal that line, by the way.
I like that line. What if it goes a little beyond even what we're thinking? Like, ask yourself this. Okay, there aren't any Revolutionary War films other than The Patriot. But realistically, how many American Civil War, French and Indian War films are there? I mean, yes, Last of the Mohicans, Gettysburg, Cold Mountain. You could name a few. There's more than one. But there really aren't that many films in any of these early chapters of American history. Okay, the animated Disney film Pocahontas. How many films are there about the discovery of the colonies and early colonial American history, even up through the American Civil War? Frankly, hardly anything. It's very limited. So this might be a problem that goes beyond the founding fathers. Like, I do think there's something there, but there's clearly, in my mind, a hesitancy to do any of these early period settings. Maybe it's economics. Like, I'm just going to throw out a theory. Maybe Hollywood executives have decided, those aren't money makers, or those are unlikely to be money makers. Maybe we ought to just stick with World War II, right? Like, people are familiar with that. Is it just a economic calculation?
Greg. I will walk right out there onto the plank you've laid. And I think...
I don't know what other explanation there is.
I think part of it is demographics. Most of the people in the country can't trace their ancestry back before the Civil War. Most of the people living in America today are the descendants of people who came here after the Civil War.
So you don't think they'd find those earlier periods
brings us to our sponsor today, Ancestry.com. Use code Armchair. I wish.
The American Revolution is almost foreign history, because the American Revolution is white. I'm just going to throw this out there, and they can hate me in the comments. I don't give a crap. The American Revolution isn't about any of that nonsense about all men are created equal or taxation without representation. That's all bullshit that they fed us in school so that we would stand up when it was time to say the pledge. The American Revolution was about the people who were the elites in the colonies decided it would be better for them to be the big fish in the little pond and run the colonies than it would be for them to be little fish in the big pond and be ruled by England. The revolution isn't about home rule, but rather who would rule at home. And that sets the stage for all of the things that lead up to the American Civil War. And all of that is both uncomfortable and almost a foreign history because it predates most of us arriving in this country. That was shit that happened to English people long before any of us got here. So at the end of the day, it's not pressing. World War II, on the other hand, the mythology of World War II is completely different than the mythology of the American Revolution. Was it Studs Terkel that coined the phrase the good war? We were taught that World War II, Americans of all walks of life and all ethnicities and all backgrounds, which again is total bullshit, went and defeated fascism in Europe. And so to the modern American, World War II is that time in our past where we were the greatest nation on earth, and the American Revolution is that time in some distant past that was another country. We don't associate those colonial English people with modern America. There's a disconnect there.
I think there's something there. There's something to what you're saying, but what about, I mean, what about Gladiator? What about Kingdom of Heaven? What about other films about history that predate America, and yet there's an appetite for those films? We don't have any direct connection to that, but we're okay going and spending hundreds of millions of dollars on those movies.
Kingdom of Heaven sucked.
Or I was going to say, here's my counterpoint to Tony, is you mentioned, and I think it's something that I've grappled a lot with, as you know, it's something I think anybody who spends more than 5 minutes looking at American history has to ask themselves. It's like, how do we have these stated ideals as a country but have this history? And I don't disagree with some of the aspects of what you mentioned. Like, absolutely, there were founding fathers and members of the Continental Congress and people of the time who very much were like the book I'm reading right now, it's about John Hancock, who was one of the biggest merchants of the time. And British taxation was really cramping his style. But taxation exists wherever you are, regardless of government style. Taxes exist. It's just creating a new country allows John Hancock to put himself into a position that most benefits his business interests. But that being said, I wouldn't say that that's the blanket statement or reason. Like, it's just like anything today. You have people who are doing things for altruistic reasons. Like, you do have the founding fathers who are being inspired by Enlightenment philosophies and readings of the time. Because if this was just boiled down to like 30 dudes who wanted to line their pockets, we could have skipped the whole fancy written Declaration of Independence and, you know, the Constitution that gave regular everyday people more rights than pretty much any other country at that time. Like, we could have passed all that. Like, they could have established a dictatorship if they wanted. They could have just said, you know, fuck you, King George, we're starting our own country, and then, you know, good old GW could have been the new king. But they didn't. They still implemented a new form of government that, despite its flaws, still gave more power to the people, gave more rights to the people, and gave the new country a pathway, like a pathway to become the ideals it stated. Like, the document doesn't say a perfect union, it is a more perfect union, as in there is always room to strive for betterment. So But with your theory, I think that is one of the reasons why it's hard to do films maybe from this time period, because we have to wrestle with that question of, well, we say all men are created equal, but we have our willing workers over here at the beginning of the film. Like that's a hard thing to rationalize.
True, very true. Greg, rebuttal?
It is. And no rebuttal. I actually think that is probably one of the best explanations for why we are where we are. And there is no one explanation, but that one makes a lot of sense to me. It really does. And it's a shame, because I agree with both of you. You know, you've both said many times you think that we might be ready, like as a country, we might be ready to have some of those conversations that, you know, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s were less comfortable to have. And I hope we are ready. But even now, you know, you don't see any signs of movement on this issue. You know, I mean, I read Variety, I read Entertainment Weekly. I know what movies are in production for the next 3 years. I can tell you right now, there aren't any Revolutionary War films coming in the next few years. So don't hold your breath. And that is still just very curious to me. I think we've talked about some possible explanations.
They're keeping a lid on the Bunker Hill movie. That's what it is. Come next year.
Don't hold your breath.
But I would go to see. I think if you did a historical war film in the American Revolution, forget all the dad-son bonding crap. Do a historical war film, something on the, think back to those massive big budget star-studded cast war movies of the 60s and 70s, Battle of Britain, A Bridge Too Far, The Longest Day, where it's just a famous historic battle. I really think you could do a successful box office film based on a Revolutionary War battle. Bunker Hill would be a perfect example. I think that the reason that I feel that The Patriot isn't the film and isn't the formula is because there are some hard issues surrounding the revolution, and The Patriot kind of shows us those issues, but then just tap dances around them. If you weren't going to talk about them, why even bring that into the film? It just makes it seem like, well, we wanted to talk about it, but we were afraid. I'd rather you just not include it than just show it and push it aside. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And one of the other things about The Patriot that's really curious to me on the whole tap dancing around these issues is that I think a lot of times when you talk about bad movies, it comes down to writing, and it comes down to your screenwriter. There's a lot of bad movies that can be blamed on screenwriting. You know, the guy who wrote The Patriot is the guy who wrote Saving Private Ryan, Robert Rodat, who won an Oscar as a screenwriter. He's a very experienced and frankly very good screenwriter. And the fact that he was unable to grapple with these issues, and as you said, Tony, he was trying to kind of touch on this stuff. Like, he knew it was important. And there you have an Oscar-winning screenwriter, a veteran, who just can't square the circle. Like, that tells you how hard it is.
Well, I mean, you also kind of touched on it when you did your review of the Alamo. Like, there's also quite a bit of them trying to catch that lightning in the bottle that was Saving Private Ryan. Like, everybody is trying to hit that, like, next big war epic that's going to win 73 billion Oscar awards.
Yeah, and that's what they were trying to do here. They got the producer from Saving Private Ryan, they got the writer from Saving Private Ryan, and they cast Mel Gibson, who, back in '99 when they filmed this, was probably the biggest movie star on the planet. So like they tried. They went all in, and the budget was huge. It was one of the most expensive live action movies ever filmed up to that point. They spent a lot of money, 110 million.
Yeah, 100, 110, 111, something like that. I have that.
So they gave it a shot.
And like I said, I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't think that it's a good American Revolution film. And I know it's the only one. But if you had to tell somebody, oh, what can I watch to learn about the American Revolution? I can't tell them go watch Patriot.
No.
You know what my history teacher did when we hit our American Revolution unit? We did not watch The Patriot. What we watched was 1776, the musical.
Yeah.
Bill Daniels.
Sure.
So that's our one other like real comparative big budget movie.
There you go.
What does that say? I love 1776.
I'm not saying it's a bad film.
I have it on a playlist with all the Hamilton songs too. Like that's what's been bumping in my car all week.
But we have
so wild. That's all we have.
The musical, and we have The Patriot.
That's it.
The fundamental event that brings about the existence of the United States. And these are the only two things out of Hollywood. And 1776 isn't really out of Hollywood. It's a Broadway play that is adapted for film.
Yeah, just like they did for Hamilton.
Right. And this is I still haven't come to grasp with what that says. Like I'm still at a loss to explain it. I have some ideas, but I really have nothing that I'm like, here it is.
You know what I'm hearing is we should fix this problem, Tony. The three of us, we can do a joint venture. We'll write and produce a Revolutionary War film.
Exactly.
We just need a couple $100 million.
Yeah. So if any of the sponsors out there would like to help out, that'd be great.
We could do this low budget. My backyard has a lot of trees. We can shoot the woodland scenes there.
You can be the guy that says, haha, we're not like those stupid redcoats.
There it is.
So the most important question of the evening, what are you guys drinking?
I am drinking 15-year Glengoyne. It is excellent.
Really?
Well, I was drinking. I finished it about 30 minutes ago.
That's higher class than my normal co-host choice. So,
Johnny Walker?
No. Usually it's something like I'm drinking hams or something stupid like that.
Oh boy.
Oh.
What are you
I'm
pouring?
drinking Coors Light and Mountain Dew.
I am, as always.
Knob
Greg
Creek.
will vouch for this. I am drinking Knob Creek on the rocks.
There it is.
Solid.
Yeah. And I started out with a pint glass, which has now got 3 small ice cubes and like 1 finger's worth of liquid in the bottom.
I'm very happy to share my choice with you, which you guys are in closer proximity to it, so you could actually get it if you wanted. It'd take a little bit of a road trip from you guys, but so one, I'd like to start off by showing my glass. There's the camera.
Oh, I see it.
I have my Declaration of Independence rocks glass. So one, I'm on theme there. Secondly, I just finished off. I had a bottle of rye whiskey from Mount Vernon.
Oh,
very
so
nice.
what Mount Vernon does is they have one of George Washington's many ventures was whiskey distilling. And a couple of years ago, they actually found the foundation of the original distillery that they're now starting to excavate. But
I remember that.
they also have his original recipes. So what they do is every year they produce a limited number of bottles using his recipes and producing it the way they would have in the 1700s, like with a wood fire and like filling a tank up with like buckets of water.
That's cool. That's cool.
It's a very labor intensive thing. So you get like a 375 milliliter bottle for like $100. So it's a spendy whiskey, but like I mentioned earlier, George Washington, he's my homie. So I was able to contact a person once through the wonders of the internet, and I was like, hey, if I PayPal you some money, will you go to Mount Vernon and ship me this bottle? And they did. So that's what I had this evening was George Washington's rye whiskey.
Oh, that's excellent.
And
That's
now
cool.
I have no more
That is
whiskey and
very
I am
cool.
sad. So if you know
Well, there's always
anybody
the
in the
next
Virginia,
podcast.
if you know anybody in the Virginia area, or if you feel like doing a road trip to get a bottle yourselves, I will gladly give you some money to pick me one up too. I think you should do one of your next games at Mount Vernon.
That would be cool. That'd be cool. It's a beautiful spot there. We have some
But-
big anniversaries coming up.
We do. I was a little disappointed. Originally, I was planning on, me and my wife were planning on taking a trip out to Boston this week and spending the 4th out there. But life happens and she is now with child. So the whole traveling thing is not the greatest idea.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, the weird sewing sleep sack thing didn't work around here. So
Good.
Tony, are you still there?
M.
Okay. On my
Yeah, I
end,
don't know.
you were just frozen for a second. But I think it's about time to rate this thing. I don't know about you guys. If you might recall, we don't do stars around here. We find that a little boring. Last time you guys were here, I think we did like helmets full of scrambled eggs or something for Battleground as our rating.
What would you like to do this evening?
Something I routinely complain about in war movies is the love stories. And it's not that I'm anti-love story. It's that I think war movies don't incorporate them that well a lot of the time. This film is one of those times where if it was any other film, you'd be like, the story between Heath Ledger and, the merchantman's daughter, I think her name was Anne. It seems really short, rushed. Like, you're like, they hung out like one time and then they got married. But there's a lot of little moments, like him asking dad permission to write her, like the sleep sack, all this stuff, that it's really interesting to be able to see 18th century courting traditions in film, because there's almost nothing about the revolution, so there's even less about courtship in this time frame. So it's one of those things where it's like a normal viewer might be like, oh, this seems really rushed and doesn't make sense to me. But for the 1700s, it's kind of on point. Like,
I thought for a moment the romance you were going to talk about was the fact that from the beginning, Mel Gibson's character and his deceased wife's sister are like eye banging each other from the first time we see them.
hey, it's the 1700s. The pickings are slim, okay? Anyways,
I don't know, the pickings looked pretty good there to me.
There's not a blood relation. So what's the issue, Tony?
I'm not saying there's an issue. I was just pointing out that immediately it became evident.
Nope, I'm going with
That
the Heath
he
Ledger
was
love story,
thinking,
not the Mel Gibson love story.
I would like to hit thee.
There's a small little comical moment where Heath Ledger's in his sleep sack to prevent canoodling, because heavens to Betsy, that never happened in the 1700s. And Anne is giving him tea, which scandalous. Tea during the revolution? Come on, switch to coffee. Be a team player. But but she plays a joke on him and fills the tea full of ink and it stains his teeth. And it's this big haha moment. And then the next day, they depart and they see each other, and we see Anne smile, and she also has tea on her teeth, and it's like, oh, they made out. I don't know. It was a fun little departure in this film to see that particular love story. And then, obviously Anne dies her tragic death in a war crime. So I would like to use the rating of 1 to 5 cups of tea filled with ink.
All right, and we're saying more ink is better, right?
More ink.
Yes, 5 cups of tea would be the best, and 1 cup or 1 or less cup of tea would be the worst.
Tony, I'm going to let you go first.
I'm going to give it 3 cups of ink-stained tea. Do I need to provide justification?
If you like, or you can leave it as is.
It was a good movie. Was it a revolutionary film? Not really, but it was a good movie. It was an enjoyable 158 minutes.
It was a long movie. Good thing we didn't do the director's cut.
I'm gonna just go ahead and out myself as a fan of the Patriot. I've always thought it's a very fun, watchable movie. I've watched it many times. I always have fun watching it. I'm giving it 4 cups of inky tea out of 5. It's a pretty high rating. The historical accuracy is just dreadful. It's very bothersome, as we've discussed for the last hour and a half. But everything else about this film, I actually think is excellent. The casting is great. The cinematography is beautiful. John Williams' score is iconic. Costumes, story, pacing. I mean, straight down the line, I actually think it's a really good Hollywood popcorn blockbuster.
All right. I think I'm going to split the difference of you guys. I'm going to do
weak.
I'm going to do 4 cups of tea, but the 4th cup is just regular tea, not ink stained. I agree with you. It is a fun movie. It's definitely a blockbuster. And like I said, I watched it a lot as a kid and I really like it. It's just, every time I come back to it, the more I find myself like rolling my eyes at it. So it's one of those things where it's like, let's say yesterday was the very last time I ever watched this film. I think I would still hold it in pretty high regards. I don't know if continuing to watch this 20 years from now, how I would feel about it. Like, I feel like the more I watch this, the more I'm going to continuously start to hate it more. Like, there's a lot of nostalgia factor playing into this film for me.
Well, we all rated it pretty well, I would say.
Yeah. And I do think that when we're talking about films that have been out for a quarter of a century, nostalgia factor figures heavily into our opinions of the films. like you said, 20 years from now, your opinion may be totally different. There are movies that Greg is an enormous Star Wars fan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not.
Oh, you're one of them Trekkies.
No, what it is for me, I saw Star Wars in the theater. And I felt that all the theater presentations after that, the Star Wars films after that, detracted from rather than added to the story. And for me, in spite of the fact that if I watch that film now, I'm like, wow, this is really, like, the special effects are dated, the storyline is dated, but there's that nostalgia element because I remember being that 13-year-old boy coming out of none of our parents wanted to go, so they just dumped us at the theater for the Saturday matinee and picked us up when it was over, and we were high on Star Wars because it was a group of teenage boys. And so for me, that's one of those films where, like you with this film, that nostalgia element allows me to overcome some of the about the story and the effects. And I believe that definitely influences our scores on not just this movie, but any movie that we were to discuss. If it's something that we remember from back in the day, as it were, that perception influences our feelings about it.
I mean, the nostalgia factor can't be overstated, I think. But I know this has been pressing on everybody's mind, but as is tradition, we'll compare our ratings to Rotten Tomatoes.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So the thermometer, or the critic score, is 62%, which is lower than all of us. But the popcorn meter, or the fan score, is 81%,
which is a little higher.
81%. I mean, that feels about right to me. I mean, it's a fun movie. I'm not surprised that fans enjoyed it a lot more than critics. It's definitely a popcorn flick. So that rating does not surprise me.
When looking, I'm going to ask both of you, when looking at movies, is this something I should watch? Do you put more weight on fan reviews or professional film critic reviews? Like, if you're up in the air about, do I spend the money to watch this film? What is it? Which of those carries more weight?
To me, that's a no-brainer.
We do this, every episode we'll do our ratings and then we'll compare it to Rotten Tomatoes because of that very reason, which is, do we trust the fans or do we trust the critics? Because there are times we've reviewed films and we are lockstep with the critics, and there are other times we've reviewed films and it's like, I don't know what the critics are thinking, but like the fans love this and we think it's a great film, all that. I don't think you can blanket statement trust one or the other all the time. And one of my big points to this is the first film we ever rated or reviewed that had 100% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes was Sands of Iwo Jima.
Oh.
Don't get me wrong, I like Sands of Iwo Jima. I think it definitely has its place in film history, and I would even say it's a good film. It is not a perfect film. Like, I don't know what the critics were thinking giving it 100. So for that reason, I'm wary to go one way or the other.
Greg, you said the answer was easy.
It's easy. I don't even look at the critic score. I don't even
Okay.
care what the critics say. There's far too few of them, so you're looking at way fewer data points, and almost every critic nowadays, this has changed over the last 20 years. Almost every critic nowadays has some kind of dog in the fight. You know, they're trying to preserve their access with a certain studio. You know, they all have inherent business interests in the way that they look at these films. I would much rather look at the fan score, where you're looking at literally tens of thousands of people who are scoring the film. I think you're much more likely to get a realistic read now. So, yeah, critic score couldn't care less. Means nothing.
I'm
What about you?
surprised that you chose the plebeian masses.
I know it's not like me, is it?
Fun fact: we actually just crossed the threshold to be eligible to apply to be a Rotten Tomato critic.
Oh, what's the
Ooh.
threshold?
2 years of consistent film reviews.
Oh, fascinating. I didn't know what the threshold was for that.
So because
Interesting.
we do a weekly film review, and we've been doing it for 2 years or a little over 2 years now, we can now apply to be one.
Well, now I'm
Wow.
going to have to care about the critic score.
Until you find out about my special interests.
Exactly. I want to know who bought you.
Nobody's bought me. That's the fucking problem. I would like to say to anybody listening to this,
Hang in there.
I am completely open to be bought. Nobody's bought me yet. First offer, I'll take it.
That's the American way, right
That
there,
is
boys.
that is right there. Greg, Tony, it's been great having you. If you'd like to share, your YouTube page, any other social media places you're at, any projects you got coming out you want people to keep an eye out for, the floor is yours.
Greg, that's all you, brother, man.
Well, you can find both Tony and I at Little Wars TV. We are on YouTube, Facebook. Tony runs our Instagram page. We make historical wargaming videos and occasionally movie reviews as well. So I mentioned on the 4th of July in a few days, we'll actually have a Patriot analysis coming up, which will pair very nicely with the discussion we had today.
Great. And, we mentioned earlier in the podcast, you guys just came out with a Bunker Hill war game video. I watched it. Very entertaining, as is any of your war games that you do. So definitely go and check that out. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review. The stars do matter. If you want additional content from us, you can find us basically anywhere: Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, OnlyFans.
I have a subscription to the OnlyFans page. It's well worth the money. It's $29.95 a month, but what the hell?
Hey, if you want to see Jack wearing nothing but a bicorn hat, that's the place to see it.
Phew. It'll be a sleepless night tonight, boys and girls.
Go take a cold shower. Greg, Tony, thank you so much again for joining us. Until next time, I've been John, and we will catch you all later.
Thank you so much.